In business today, three things to know. First, General Motors agrees to pay a $35 million fine to the government for failure to report defective ignition switches. Here's the thing, GM earns that money in just 2 hours. So who got the better part of that deal? Then, can you outrun the bear? Growing belief among some analysts that the market is heading for bear market territory, but it has a long way to go if so. Still, should we hunker down? And a new vision for the world's largest democracy. Indians elect a new government in a landslide, and that means an economic sea change for one of the key emerging markets. Arise Exchange for this Friday starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. General Motors got itself out of one jam Friday by agreeing to pay the U.S. government a $35 million fine. That settles a federal probe into the decade-long delay in recalling cars with ignition switch problems. GM also agrees to stricter government oversight. Here's the U.S. Secretary of Transportation touting the settlement.
These penalties should put all automakers on notice that there is no excuse and zero tolerance for failing to notify the federal government when a defect puts safety at risk. And to make that point clearer, DOT has sent the Grow America Act up to Capitol Hill, which would raise the maximum penalty for offenses like this from $35 million to $300 million.
Still, it's only $35 million, and GM makes that every couple of hours, raising criticism that the fine is meaningless. And there's questions as to what exactly regulators were doing in the first place, missing years of problems with the ignition switches. The faulty ignition switches are blamed for at least 13 deaths when cars would suddenly turn off, causing accidents. The car coach, Lauren Fix, is here with her thoughts. Lauren, is this a victory for GM CEO Mary Barra?
Well, I don't know about a victory because nobody needs the penalty, and they've already predicted this as a loss for the next month as far as their total overall profit margin. But I think for GM, they're trying to get in front of this problem as best they can, and it is very difficult. In the past, they've had about 25 safety officials. As soon as Jeff Boyer got into place, he added more, so we're at 35. And I believe as of today, we're at 50 safety inspectors, as well as all the new regulations that NHTSA is going to demand GM meet with them monthly. So I think this is actually a victory for Mary when it comes from a safety perspective, showing that she's doing what it takes. And if anyone in that company can really showcase safety, I think it's going to be her because of her background. I don't think it's going to be necessary to track down one or two individuals who could have been a part of the old GM. This is new GM. We got to work from this point forward and follow on this rules, and there are quite a few of them that they require.
I was about to ask you about that. You mentioned the regulator, the National Highway Safety and Traffic Administration. What new rules will the government be looking at overseeing GM? And we do have to remember that part of what went on here was a failure of government regulators.
Absolutely. I think that NHTSA is part to blame on this, too. They didn't continue to go after the data when they had a data spike. There were some people at NHTSA that raised a red flag and submitted it to whoever their bosses were, and somehow, I don't know if it has to do with the government intervention with GM from the old GM or not. That we may never know, but as of today, they have to meet with NHTSA monthly for at least the next year to discuss all technical service bulletins and any possible defect issues. They have to provide NHTSA with a monthly list of every safety-related issue that's being evaluated by the company. They also have to give a full copy of the internal investigation. That's the one they're working all the way back into the early 2000s. And they have to submit reports on the progress of the ignition call every 2 months for 6 months. Remember, a lot of those ignition switches are not going to get to dealers until October.
And Lauren, I just want to jump in there. This does also nothing for the private lawsuits, correct? Those are moving forward.
That is absolutely. There are quite a few. Right now, there's 75 lawsuits as we speak that are filed in federal court. This is nothing. This is separate. I am hoping that GM, who have not announced this yet, that they're actually going to put a fund together for the people that have lost lives or had serious injuries and try to help some of these people, because the fact is that to get all these people that still haven't been notified that we don't know about are out there, they speak their languages, and that's part of what NHTSA is demanding, that they communicate through other forms of media to reach non-English speaking drivers. I mean, this is
okay, Lauren,
because a car 10 years old is going to have a lot of miles.
Okay, we've got to go, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Turning to the markets, they drifted in and out of positive territory Friday, ending overall a little bit on the upside, but down for the week. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 44.5 to 16,491. The S&P 500 to 1877. And the NASDAQ up about 21 to 4090. Taking a look at some of the top stocks we're watching today. Foxconn, a Taiwanese electronics company and a major manufacturer of Apple iPhones and iPads, says it's shutting down for 3 days after violent anti-Chinese protests hit the region. Apple closing up 8 to 597.51. Darden Restaurants, the parent company of Red Lobster, says it's selling the chain and other related assets and assumed liabilities to Golden Gate Capital for $2.1 billion in cash. Darden, down 220 to 48.49. And one of the world's largest producers of aluminum says it's reached a tentative 5-year deal with unionized workers at 10 of its U.S. metal plants. That would be Alcoa. AA closing up 13 cents to 13.45. And looking at commodities, gold down, oil up to 102.13. Finally, some good news on the housing front. Home construction in April soared to its fastest annual pace since November. The Census Bureau says housing starts rose 13.2% in April, possibly because of the cold weather the previous month. Consumer sentiment, however, took a hit this month, coming in at 81.8. That's down from 84.1 the month before, with the recent market sell-off and the fact that the bull market is getting a little bit long in the tooth. Some maybe get a little bit concerned there. Let's talk about the bear market for a moment, or the so-called bear market that some analysts are talking about, but not our next guest. Jeff DeMaso joins us to talk a little bit about your thoughts on where we're headed for the market right now, because there has been sort of now the truth sayers out there, if you will, the fortune tellers, saying that the bull market has gone on too long. We're starting to see a sell-off, and we should start getting worried about it. Your thoughts?
You know, everybody wants to call the top of the bull market and really catch that and be that, you know, kind of have that piece in their hat, that feather in their hat. You know, my take on it is, you know, it's really hard to call that. Day to day, it's kind of a coin toss whether the market's going to be up or down. Since the market bottomed in March 2009, there's been about 1,300 trading days. Only 56% of them have been up on a daily basis. Yet S&P 500 is up about 210%.
Does that mean we're having much bigger up days than we are down days?
It does, yeah. It's the magnitude of the up days that's giving us those type of gains.
And when you look at the bear market, we're a long way from that territory. We're not even really near a correction yet.
No, not even close.
The correction's like a 10%.
Yeah, I mean, S&P hit an all-time high on Wednesday, so we're just, you know, 1% or so below. Not even in correction is 10%. Pullback is 5%. So we're not even really talking about that yet. Everyone's really just trying to call that top, and I don't think it's a game long-term investors should be playing.
Let's talk about economic data, and the key point here is this quarter has to be better than last quarter because everybody wanted to blame the weather. Where do you think we're coming in right now on that?
You know, it's definitely a bit mixed. Retail sales were pretty anemic in April, although the months prior were pretty good. But it definitely seems everybody wanted every single number to hit on the head coming out of the poor, cold winter coming into spring, and we're definitely not seeing everything good, but again, as we've talked about in the past, slow recovery, slow growth recovery, not everything's firing at once.
There's some thought that the Fed is starting to see exactly what the Fed wants to see, which is a little bit of inflation and better employment. Do you believe that that's true?
You know, that's what's coming in right now. PPI, CPI, producer inflation and consumer inflation both came in right around 2%. Employment seems to be moving in the right direction. You know, so I think they're getting what they're seeing. They can continue along the tapering path. No need to change that right now.
One of the areas back to the stock market that you've been talking about is small market caps, specifically the Russell 2000, which is a basket of the small market caps. When you talk about a bear market, you do think that we're headed in for some trouble there.
You know, the small caps are off about 8% right now, 9% depending on what index you're looking at. We do think we could be heading towards something, but that would be completely normal. I just want to stress that's really normal with the market. As long-term investors, we always say, what's a long-term investor? I think that means expecting markets to decline a bit.
Well, you gotta have people taking some money and some profits, and there are people in it for the short term, for the medium term, and for the long term.
Yep, and we do see markets move up and down. On average, over the past 24 years, small cap stocks have declined about 18, 19% on average each year. So if you're going to invest in small cap stocks, you have to expect a neo-bear market.
So for a long-term investor, and you're looking at small cap stocks, do you just hang tight and absorb the losses?
I do. I don't think you try and move in and out on this. You've got to be expecting. Stocks are kind of ugly to own. You know, we've talked about already. Yeah. They have regular drawdowns, day to day. It's kind of like a coin toss. But long term for investors, it's been the best way to grow your wealth.
And any other sectors that you like right now?
You know, we like healthcare.
Continue to like healthcare.
We continue to like healthcare. We think, you know, while some things might have gotten a little overextended early in the year, just the same way things that are great and going to do well long term were thrown out with the bathwater.
Do you look at something like housing and say maybe it's time to get more aggressive in housing if you believe the most recent numbers and if you believe that the comps from quarter to quarter are going to look good?
You know, you could make that argument. I think housing lost some of its momentum from a year ago. But this most recent number, as you said, maybe the past couple aren't so bad, and we might be doing all right in the spring. Okay,
Jeff DeMaso, the Director of Research at Advisor Investments.
Great.
Thank you so much. Okay, have a good weekend. Coming up, how the economic policy of the world's largest democracy is about to change. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
A big change has come to India, history making, after the controversial Hindu nationalist leader Narendra Modi won a historic landslide election for prime minister, a victory for the world's largest democracy. Modi's party toppled a regime that's held control over India's government for more than 6 decades. He has promised to make key changes in economic reform and trade. To talk more about this, we turn now to John Echeverri-Gent. He is University of Virginia professor and the treasurer of the American Institute for Indian Studies. John, welcome to the program. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Was this victory such a surprise for the huge landslide, and what is his mandate now?
No, it wasn't a surprise at all. It looked in the polls as though he was going to win a smashing victory, and it turns out that he won an even greater victory than what was projected. And it means, I think, that India's economy is going to accelerate in terms of its growth, and we're going to see a series of reforms that will support the economic growth.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit and what those reforms might be. India has seen slow growth. It has also seen some high inflation. It's difficult to tackle both of those at the same time. How is he expected to do it?
Well, I think we're going to see reforms, especially in terms of tax policy. I think that in terms of matters of economic policy, one of the things that we're going to see is that he's noted, when he was a leader of the state of Gujarat, he was noted to be a pro-business politician, and we're going to see a change in the orientation at the central government level. And so we're going to see things like measures that will facilitate government projects and that will encourage investment that's going to contribute to accelerated growth.
And specifically foreign investment. You know, he wants a plan to bring more foreign dollars into India.
Yes, and actually we've already seen an increase in foreign investment in India. We've seen actually a very substantial increase in foreign portfolio investment in India, and I expect that he will take some measures, although perhaps more limited in terms of encouraging foreign direct investment, but nonetheless I expect foreign direct investment to increase under the Modi government.
And jobs, of course, and job creation, a big part of this election. You know, how quickly can he ramp up job creation? And talk about, you know, how long the patience may be for him if he can't get the economy to turn around.
Well, increasing jobs is going to be a bigger challenge because India's workforce, especially at the lower end, is not as skilled as what ideally we would like. But nonetheless, I think that over the longer term, there is going to be an increase in acceleration of India's employment generation. I think that he will help to bring about more investment in infrastructure that's going to help, and I think that he will help in terms of creating more programs to better train the workers. So I think that overall, with the increase in investment, improvement in infrastructure, you will see an increase in employment generation.
Yeah, and let's talk about infrastructure for a moment, because India is, a mix of some cities and very rural areas. Is that a challenge here for the economy?
Well, absolutely, because it's a big country with a big rural hinterland, and the idea of integrating the rural areas into the more urban areas, and especially in India, there are some areas that have grown very rapidly. So, for instance, Modi's state of Gujarat over the last decade has grown at a better than 10% per year average annual rate of growth. But there are other areas that are being left behind, and that is a big challenge of moving forth the entire economy as opposed to just a few growth poles.
India, of course, is one of these so-called BRIC countries. We put labels on these emerging markets: Brazil, Russia, India, China. All of those nations have had a little bit of a pullback, except for maybe China recently in the emerging markets. Do you think India is going to help lead the way back from the emerging markets?
Well, these are very different economies,
sure.
And they have limited integration. But I think that it is the case that India's growth is going to accelerate at a faster pace than the growth in the other BRIC states. And I think you're going to see in the next couple of years India return. It's now growing at less than 5%. You're going to see it return to over 7% growth. And in that sense, I think it's going to be at least up with China as the fastest growing of the BRICS.
And of course, I forgot to mention the S, which of course is South Africa. S&P warning of a downgrade for, I'm sorry, go ahead. John? I wanted to mention S&P warning of a downgrade of India's bond status. Could this election reverse that a little bit?
Yes, I think so. I don't think that. I think that what we're going to see in the near term is no change in India's status. But I think as growth accelerates, and I think we're going to see improvement in key indicators, for instance, the current account deficit, which has already been improved. I think we're going to see further improvement in terms of the fiscal deficit. So I don't think that India is any longer in danger of a downgrade. And in fact, I think that over the medium term, we might see an improvement in its rating.
And finally, to combat inflation, it may have to raise interest rates, which could be painful for the populace. Is he expected to do so?
Well, I'll tell you, India has a relatively conservative chief of its central bank, and Raghuram Rajan, who's an economist with the business school in the University of Chicago, at least prior to taking this job. That's where he served. And they're already at relatively high rates. They may go up slightly more, but I don't anticipate big increases at this point. I think that the changes have to take place more at the fiscal level, and I think we're going to see some changes at the fiscal level to continue to reduce the fiscal deficit, and that's what's going to bring down inflation.
Okay, John Echeverri-Gent from the University of Virginia, thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
You're very welcome. Bye.
Time now for our business ticker stories making news around the globe. Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling plans to see the NBA in court and not the basketball court. Sterling says he will not pay the $2.5 million fine the league levied against him for his racist tirade that was recorded by a girlfriend. And Sterling says he will fight any effort to force him to sell the team. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver also banned Sterling from the league for the rest of his life. A vote to force a sale of the team by the other league owners is expected soon. Meantime, the Clippers season ended Thursday night when the Oklahoma City Thunder beat them in Game 6 of the playoffs. Malaysian Airlines may be in a financial tailspin as the search for the missing Flight 370 is in month 2. The airline is reporting that its losses are now accelerating. Malaysian lost $138 million for the quarter, but the airline says those losses were not unexpected. The airline is largely owned by the state. Apparently, we're consuming a lot of sugar because sugar prices are going up amid stronger than expected demand and bad weather in Brazil. Prices had fallen as low as 14 cents a pound, but have now been creeping up now to over 18 cents. Still, that's way below the 36 cents a pound 3 years ago. And part of our regulatory police state series. Listen to this story. One city in Georgia may soon require you to have a license to ring someone's doorbell. The city of Snellville is so worried about door-to-door salesmen that the city council is considering a law that would require these nefarious people to undergo background checks and get an official license before they knock, ring once, or ring twice someone's door. And for the record, Girl Scouts trying to raise money by selling cookies would have to get a license too. So would the kid raising money for his school's band, or the kid who wants to mow your lawn. He needs a license. Apparently, the proposed law is the result of a string of bogus salesmen who have scammed elderly homeowners into buying home repairs. How about the police do their job and arrest those guys and leave everyone else alone to be friendly neighbors? Coming up, it's back to high school for our favorite person of the day here on Arise Exchange.
One of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world, as we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Mainstream news has covered all of the issues of the world, which are like this, through a very narrow lens. And at Arise News, we do things different. We cover every culture, every angle. Our mission is to go to these places, to these communities, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Europe, Asia, the United States, the Caribbean. And we're going to find these stories, and we're going to tell them to our audience. Stories that they probably never heard of before, and stories that they'll find interesting and engaging.
Time for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. We're all looking for discounted things and even some freebies. Well, how about a free casket for when you die? 2 funeral homes in upstate New York are offering retirees at Eastman Kodak a free casket if they prepay for their funeral. The deal by the Bartolomeo and Pareto Funeral Home and the Walter Brothers Funeral Home follows the bankruptcy of Kodak and the subsequent loss of life insurance and health care for Kodak employees. And the employees, by the way, are also eligible for a discount on tickets to see Mary Poppins, while they're still alive, I might add. Kodak filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago, unable to compete in the new digital film and camera business. And so that takes us to our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Ever want to be back in high school? Well, one 31-year-old Texas woman actually pulled it off, spending 9 months as a sophomore at the New Life Christian School in Longview, Texas. According to police, Charity Ann Johnson, that's her name, Charity Ann Johnson, attended the high school for nearly the entire school year, pretending to be a teenager. She did all her homework. She even got good grades and made friends. Johnson kept up appearances by posing for selfies on Instagram and wearing friendship bracelets. The principal says she enrolled like any other teenager and they had no reason to be suspicious, even though she's 31 years old. Johnson also lied about her age to a woman who provided her a home to live in. She became suspicious, however, that Johnson was not 15 years old when she received a call from someone who did a background check on Johnson as part of a group that helps needy children. Johnson was arrested for lying about her name and some other offenses, maybe eating the school lunch, I don't know. It's unclear why she pulled off the hoax in the first place. And so Charity Ann Johnson is our favorite person of the day. Coming up next, Made in the USA, how we are a rising star in manufacturing and how this will impact the global economy. It's Friday. That means it's 5 o'clock somewhere. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I don't think that television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not gonna do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. The U.S. is undergoing a rebirth of manufacturing within our shores, a big change from decades of outsourcing manufacturing overseas. In fact, U.S. factories added jobs for 6 straight years now. Why is Made in the USA appearing on more goods? Harry Moser is here to help break it down. Harry is president of the Reshoring Initiative, a nonprofit group that works with companies to bring manufacturing back to the USA. Harry, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So when people hear about manufacturing in the U.S., they think too expensive, taxes too high, regulations too tough, workers get paid too much, which is maybe why so much business moved to China and Mexico over the years. But now it's returning. Why?
Some of the things that drove it there have changed. The Chinese wages have gone up substantially, maybe 15 to 20% per year for 15 years. As a result, it's now the total cost to make a product in China is getting close enough so that when you add in all the other costs, the duty, freight, packaging, carrying cost of inventory, and so on, for many products, it now makes sense to make here.
What about quality? And I'll tell you a quick story. Cessna, for example, tried to outsource an airplane to China, and they gave up on it because of quality concerns. Is that a factor here?
Quality is one of the 29 costs that we help companies to calculate. Quality, warranty, opportunity costs, and so on. So in some cases, China does a good job. They make Apple products that obviously are pretty good quality. So if it's a high volume product for a big name company, they do a pretty good job. But as they get down into smaller quantities, the quality tends to suffer.
Well, and also there's been some concern, of course, with those products from Apple and other places of the Chinese labor force and how they're treated. Does that give American companies a little bit more pause?
It gives consumers pause for Chinese and Bangladesh and other products. I think most important, the Chinese workers have rising expectations. They're going on the internet and seeing how we live, and they're demanding the same. They're striking and not quite revolting, but getting pretty tough with the employer and the government, and so their wages keep going up rapidly, and that makes us relatively more competitive. So
basically, we sort of had a few decades of a reprieve in the labor market, if you will, because now these other workers are getting more authority and pushing wages higher and reshifting the balance.
It had to happen eventually. It's happening faster, I think, than has ever happened in any economy before. And it's good for the Chinese, and finally it's very good for us because it gives us a chance to bring the work back.
Harry, for those who argue against free trade agreements like NAFTA, the trade agreement we have with Mexico, is this an argument against that? That you could say, look, we could have free trade and we could keep jobs here in America?
I am personally generally against the trade agreements that we've had because in most of them they were supposed to increase the U.S. economy, help the U.S. economy. And with most of the agreements that we've had, our imports have gone up and our exports have barely gone up, and so our trade deficit with those countries has increased. So the other countries in general have won, and in general the U.S. has lost. So,
but do you think that this could be rebalanced? Now that more products are going to be made here, are we going to see these products stay here in the U.S., or by nature are they going to get shipped overseas? Meaning, can overseas countries afford these products that are being made here in the U.S.?
In general, it's tough for us to export still because there's roughly a 20% incremental costs when any country exports far away, like to Asia or from Asia to here. So our products are just becoming competitive here with the Chinese product when the Chinese product bears that extra cost. So for us to export there with an extra 20% cost, we're not competitive. So
okay, Harry Moser. Harry Moser, thank you so much, president of the Reshoring Initiative. We're out of time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Yep, bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Arise Exchange for this week. We'll see you back here on Monday. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Have a nice weekend.